We're live.
All right. Item 9, we are reconvening to open session. It is currently 6:37 p.m. and all board members are still present. That being the case, item 9, an initial resolution authorizing general obligation bonds at an amount not to exceed $14.5 million. At this point, I'm going to pass it to Mr. Fetchel-Cotter before I say anything more.
So we have our friends from Myron and ISG and Baird that are joining us virtually. And we're going to kind of go through the projects that we'd be looking to, I guess we're going to go over a 10,000 foot view of the whole process in terms of where we started, which was a long range facility planning process that officially started back in, I believe it was April 2025. So not quite a year ago, 6-8 months ago. That culminated with staff input on an educational adequacy survey that went out to staff last year, a community survey that went out recently, which you guys heard results on in December, and then a proposal to try to find some solutions for the needs of the district while balancing that with the needs of our taxpayers, for lack of a better term. So I don't know if the folks in TV land want to introduce themselves real quick. I think you remember everybody, but I'll give them the opportunity to do that.
Excellent. Well, hello, everyone. I'm Kevin Mullen from Baird.
Good evening. Megan Prestibach with Myron.
And Kevin Bills with ISG Architects. Thank you.
So I'm going to, I don't know, Megan, do you have the PowerPoint? Kevin, I don't know which Kevin's have the PowerPoint, but if you want to share and bring that up, feel free. So.
So let me share my screen. Here we go. All right, can everyone see the screen?
Mm-hmm.
Front slide?
Can you expand the PowerPoint? There we go. Perfect, Megan.
Okay, so I do have a couple second delay there, it looks like. All right, thumbs up, we're good to go?
Good to go.
All right, so good evening. We can skip through this first slide because we just went through introduction. And thank you, Cody, for the opening. You explained really how we got to where we are. When I look back at my notes, it was April of 2025 we kicked off this process. So we've done a lot of work in less than a year. So I want to start by saying thank you for making decisions and allowing this process to move very efficiently. It started with the facilities assessment. We came in June and shared the status of your buildings. Then we went through some educational adequacy or how the spaces are functioning. Then we went through and explored options. So looking at what does the capital maintenance needs look like? What do some of the educational components? How can you enhance those? And ultimately creating options for a community survey. So in November of 2025, every resident received a survey in their mailbox, and I'll dive a little deeper into that in the next slide. But all of that led up to where we are tonight, and that is to present a recommended referendum scope for consideration for adoption. So again, process of what we've done, the 10,000 foot view of what we've done for the last 9-10 months. So again, thank you for making this process a joy to work on our end and efficient. So the survey results, it was important to us when building the strategy of how do we arrive at a referendum or proposed referendum solution, and it was important for us to get engagement. So Kevin and his team at ISG sent staff surveys. We, as a team, worked with School Perceptions to create that survey that landed in everyone's mailbox in early November of 2025. Just a few highlights that I pulled out from Rob's 20+ slide summary, but the district received a 16% response rate. Now, that is a statistically valid response rate. So I believe there was about a 3% margin of error when I looked at that. 60% always seems like a low number, but looking at statistical data, that is a good number. We also provided the community an option to come to a community information meeting while the survey was open to hear from the consultants and get some of their questions answered. And I think that worked out well because if you look at the referendum or the survey results, there's really two questions that were asked. It was your generic question when it comes to facilities planning is, should the school district cut people explore a referendum? And staff, you have 86%, parents you had 68%, and your non-parents, non-staff, you had 58%. So across the board, all subgroups were signing you permission slip to explore. Then we went on in that same survey and laid out what the proposed referendum solution would include. And that's when we laid out a $18.9 million plan. And again, strong support amongst all subgroups, staff 86%, parents 73%, non-parents, non-staff 56%. School perceptions takes a weighted average, so they look at each subgroup and the demographic of the makeup of your district and present a weighted average. And if the referendum question were to be asked that day, this is what they would anticipate. And they were saying a 63.3% success rate, again, with that 3% marginal error. But I wanted to draw attention to this because this was in November. And the results were shared in December, and we haven't get to the financing component of it. We're going to talk about how the tax bills may have impacted this. So we talk about proposed solution. This is important to keep in the back of your mind. But I'm also happy to report that there were a lot of questions at the end asking community members just about the climate and culture of your school and how you're sharing the information. And overall, the school district of Maple scored higher than most of the comparable schools. So you're actually the 86th percentile. That's great data because what that means is that the community trusts you. They respect what you're doing and they support what you're doing. And when you have positive feedback on questions when it relates to climate and culture, that usually translates into support on referendum questions. So all across the board, great news. Then diving into, Kevin will take over the proposed solution.
All right, we'll jump to the next slide. So there's really, when we think about the process and what's the proposed solution has come down to, it sort of comes into these three pillars. So we gathered, as Megan talked about, the feedback through the community survey. As a district, we asked the question. As a board, you've taken that information, you've listened, and you're responding to that with how we make decisions going forward. Prioritizing maintenance, really, this has been a theme from the beginning, but investing, but really focusing on preserving our buildings and what does that look like. Having conversations from early on in the facility assessments with custodians to building leadership, to even at community meetings and comments, questions, feedback, things that we learned there as well. Obviously, along with all our various board meetings. So very helpful feedback to help us think about what are all the different priorities for different groups, and really what does that mean district-wide. And then the third pillar, fiscal responsibility. So again, putting all three of these pillars together, fiscal responsibility, investment without raising the mill rate. So obviously Kevin will talk more about that later on. So I think simplified, these are really the three things that we've kind of worked in these three buckets all along. And so as we jump to the next slide now, what the proposed scope would be kind of falls in line with these three categories.
I think it's important for the board and the community as a whole to really realize that, you know, we asked a question around $18.9 million in November. And the tax levy came out, the majority of that increase is related to the 15% reduction that we saw in state aid, which equated to almost $1.2 million. Megan alluded to this, you know, if you're going to give a survey, you might want to listen to what people are telling you. And one of the themes that came through is, hey, look, I understand that there's needs here. Can you relook at stuff? Can you potentially pare down that list? And that's really the proposals that we're going to propose tonight. At the heart of what we're trying to do is find that middle ground between the needs of the district and the taxpayers as a whole. So as Kevin will kind of walk through, and we'll talk through the major projects that we want to try to accomplish. And I'll talk a little bit about some of the proposed things that have come off the table at this point in time after listening to our community and trying to reinvest in our buildings, make sure that they last for years to come, continue to serve our community, our students, but also to try to have that be as minimal tax impact as possible. So we've had a lot of work behind the scenes, and I can honestly say we have really tried to pare this down and find that middle ground. So Kevin, go ahead if you want to start with the high school.
Yeah, Megan, actually, could you jump back to the pie chart? I think that was just before this. Okay, it pops up here. There we go. I think this is a good example. So you see, this just breaks down of the proposed solution. So $14.5 million. Which buildings is it going to? You're seeing 54% would go towards Northwestern Elementary. You see the high school 17%, the middle school 26%, Iron River 2%, and then Bus Garage 1%. So it just gives you an idea where the dollars are going of the proposed scope. Maybe if you want to jump to the next slide.
There's just a few seconds delay, it will catch up.
No problem. Okay, so we'll start with Northwestern, the elementary. We'll pop that for just a second. Okay, all right, sorry, Northwestern. We'll start with the high school. So starting off, I will go through the,
I can't keep up with you, Kevin.
sorry, first page with the high school.
All right, it is on the high school, I will stay on the high school.
Okay.
Gotta love technology. We talked about that earlier, remember?
Yeah. Spend a lot of.
We're good to
For
go.
the high school, I'll go through these because I think it's just good awareness, and just know, should the board adopt, we will spend time building up content behind all of these, precedent for photos of the different spaces, conditions, and the needs and such. But I will go through them here. If you have questions, feel free, or Cody, if there's things that you think of, chime in as well. The high school replaced flooring in the tech ed areas or shop areas. Replace the air dryer system in the woods shop. Repair the building exterior, so specifically brickwork, some caulking and tuck pointing. So really maintain the envelope there, so we don't get water infiltration causing damage down the road. Specific pieces within the plumbing and HVAC systems that are needed for replacement. So there's some pumps, chiller, and water heater replacements. So very specific things that were identified through the facility assessment that are due based on age and condition. And so it's time to look at addressing those. Some parking lot repairs, so entrance drive and west parking lot repair work. Resurface and repaint the track, update security systems and cameras. So that's something that we've talked about and incorporate into this proposed solution for the high school specifically.
And I think it's important to know that, the majority of that it's a combination of inside the building, but mostly outside the building, which makes sense for our high school. It's our newest building. It's not brand new. I keep telling people that it's going on 20 plus years old. But one of the things we talked about in terms of trying to make cuts is one of the rooftop AC unit is reaching the end of life. We're going to cut that out of this particular project if we do go to it. And then some drainage work around the buildings. We have some low spots and stuff where water runs the right direction. That'd be something that we try to address at another time in a different situation. So there are some projects that we would like to do, but that's that middle ground we're trying to find. If, okay, 18.9 is hard, so how do we lower that number at the high school? If you want to jump to the middle school, Kevin, go ahead.
Yeah, sounds great. The middle school, the right-hand column, you see repair, replace the parking lot, driveway, and sidewalks. So quite a bit of replacement there. And that also involves where there's poor soil conditions, addressing those specific spots, so we don't get, sinkholes, things like that in the future as well. While we do that work, we also improve the drainage in those instances as well. And then inside the building, replace the classroom finishes, so flooring, cabinetry, so those spaces look refreshed and updated. Updating fire alarm system, that building has not been updated yet. Replace plumbing and HVAC systems. So again, a big one there is controls, and then also water pumps as well. And then again, you'll see this the theme: upgrade security systems and cameras.
Yeah, that's going to be throughout all of our buildings. It's just around the safety and security of our buildings. The camera systems are dated, and all of them need extensive work, and that work isn't necessarily cheap. From the cut side of things, the stage area of the middle school is dated. It's old. It's used in many different ways. Ultimately, we decided that that's going to get pulled off of the scope of this work. And then the playground restoration up at the middle school as well would be pulled off as beyond the scope of what we're doing with this particular project. So that's another way where we try to lower the ask and find that middle ground. If you want to flip, Megan, to the next slide for our elementary schools. It'll get there.
So at Northwestern, in elementary, a big item here, roof replacement. So what you see is just based on the building age, there's quite a few things that are just coming due, roof being one of them. So that is planned for in the project. Repair, replacement, the driveway, sidewalks, where we need to. Updating classroom finishes, so carpet, paint, cabinetry / casework, replacing floor tile as well, upgrading classroom electrical system to better support technology, replace the boiler and HVAC controls. So again, you see the controls item coming up, playground updates, and then again, update security systems and cameras. Cody, anything you'd add to this one?
No, I think the roof has been long talked about as a need for NES. It's the original roof to the building back in 1997. We have continued to do everything we can to move that along. Some years repairs are tens of thousands of dollars as a general average, but that is something that needs to be addressed, much like the driveway at the middle school has been heavily talked about. From the cut side, we're kind of prioritizing sections of parking lots that are in worse shape than others. So some of we've pared down the asphalt and paving aspect of it. I know that's not necessarily exciting educational stuff by any stretch of the imagination, but it is part of our buildings and grounds. We'd like to look at updating the technology in classrooms, things like our projectors, and that infrastructure is getting very dated over there. That's getting pulled off. It's still a need, but we're, grants and things of that nature are much more likely in those areas than roofs and parking lots, to be honest with you. So we're going to try to see if we can find some additional funding streams for those that help our teachers teach day in and day out at that level. The fire alarm panel and alarm system was a big cost because it needed a complete retrograde. We're going to continue to, move that along. It's dated, but we believe it can still service us. So that got cut. Interior doors and a lot of keying systems there are breaking just due to age, not necessarily neglect, but I know it doesn't sound like a huge thing, but it's a large cost to rekey a building. We're going to continue to limp along and work to replace things that come up. And then some drainage improvements that are needed, particularly on the south side of the building where water sits. We're going to hold off on that project as well as some cuts we're trying to find that and reduce our ask. So if you want to jump to Iron River, Kevin, feel free.
Yeah, sounds good. So Iron River, you'll see some very specific items addressed here for maintaining the facility. So replace the shingle section of gym roof, replace some specific windows that were, we noticed some rotting happening. So where those instances are needed. And again, we would address security system and cameras. And I'll just do bus garage as well. So some very specific maintenance items there. So repairs, some exterior wall repairs needed, and replace HVAC controls and the water heater. So Cody, if there's anything you'd like to add to those two?
Yeah, some of the Iron River cuts, the HVAC system is dated there. It's still in need, but we're going to pull it off as the scope of this project. Building controls is a commonality in a number of our buildings that's dated, but that helps us turn on and turn off systems, helps us with efficiency. We're going to pull that off the docket. Fire alarm panel, again, is dated, but still able to serve the building. That's off. We have some restrooms that are not ADA compliant. We do have an ADA compliant restroom in there, not all of them. That's getting pulled off of the scope of this project. And we're really looking to invest in the critical infrastructure of Iron River as we continue to evaluate enrollment trends across the district and figure out where that goes. So the investment in Iron River is smaller than the other buildings, but it's the critical areas to keep that building going in the initial term here as we continue to evaluate what our enrollment trends are over the next 2, 3, 4 years. So last one there, which is the most exciting one, is the bus garage. Everybody's worried about the bus garage. We know that, but we do technically have 5 buildings. So Kevin, you want to hit that up, and I'll just talk about what we're cutting out of the bus garage.
Yeah, so briefly mentioned
sorry.
bus garage.
I missed that then.
Oh, go ahead, Cody.
Go ahead, Kevin. Sorry.
Yeah, so again, as you see, there are some very specific exterior wall repairs and some specific HVAC improvements such as the controls and water heater. So very, very specific needs in that facility.
Yeah, we have a waste oil furnace that's kind of reaching the end of its life. We're continuing to use that on smaller levels, but it's not necessarily a priority for us to replace at this point in time. So it is a mix of outside of school, envelope projects, buildings and grounds projects, and some interior, not necessarily changing walls or bricks, but trying to refresh so these buildings, look and feel a little bit more updated, because this is investments that are not necessarily a year or two down the road. It's investments that are 10, 15 plus years down the road, which is that kind of foresight and thinking that we're trying to encompass in this project. Is not just looking, what does year 1, year 2 look like? It was, what does year 10, 15 look like as well? So I don't know what the next slide is. I'm going to try to pull it here. Any questions for Kevin in terms of scope of sequence on the projects? Because otherwise, I'm going to turn over to Kevin Mullen from Baird to talk the financial side of this equation, which obviously is very important too.
I just had a couple quick questions. Can somebody remind me, in the past we've talked about the fire alarm systems. I'm trying to remember which of our schools, if any, have the notifications built in. So if there's, a fire in the evening or where nobody's around, that the right people will be notified.
It's one. It's this building.
This is the only building.
Correct.
Okay. Thus the reason why the middle school and NES have.
There's some panel upgrades where we would definitely like to adjust that fact.
That's what I was thinking. Okay. Thank you for that.
Yep.
Well done.
So there's, panel upgrades and then actual hardware within the building too is kind of a 2-part project there. So we're trying to, again, go back to what we want, what we need, maybe are two different things, and trying to find what works. So. Other questions? Hearing none, I'll do one more time. I'm going to use any. Hearing none, going once, going twice. Otherwise, all right, Kevin Mullen, I'm going to turn it over to you. It sounds like.
All right, well, thank you. And so, as we start to look at the financial piece of this, I wanted to go back and review a little bit of, Megan, you can go ahead to that next slide. I wanted to review a little bit about what the levy looks like presently. And so, Megan alluded to this earlier in the presentation. The survey went out and was completed on November 21st. 3 weeks later, tax bills went out, and I'm sure I don't have to remind anyone here in this room that your levy went up, that the actual tax bill to taxpayers went up this year compared to last year. And that was really a result primarily of, as Cody mentioned earlier, a loss in state aid. But I wanted to give you this context because it's going to be helpful when we talk about what the actual tax impact looks like and how we're structuring a conversation around the tax impact. So these are three components of the school's 2025-26 tax levy, so the portion that went to the taxpayers. So you had your revenue limit, which was $8.2 million. So that's the portion of the revenue limit that is not supported by state aid. You had a small amount of community service of $59,000, and as a point of reference, the pink balloon on the right-hand side, you had $3.7 million levied for your last payment on your old borrowing that's going to be retired this year. So if you added those three pieces of the levy together, your total tax levy was $12,040,000. And that compares to the tax levy last year, the dollars that you asked for last year, which were basically $10.4 million. So the difference between last year and this year was roughly $1.6 million. So, clearly, people in the community probably felt that. But I think moving forward, we don't need to be at that level once this referendum debt, the piece of cake, is paid off. So that piece goes away. Then you can, if you don't mind, roll forward. So the total levy was $12,040,000. If you were to convert that into a tax rate, you would take the total value of all the property within the school district, $1,684,000,000, and divide the $12,040,000 by that total value to come up with the tax rate. And the tax rate for the 2025-26 school year was $7.15, meaning for every $100,000 of home value, someone they would expect to pay $715 annually for the school portion of home. So what I'd like to do is use that tax rate first as our comparison, both historically and to some peers. So if you looked at the $7.15 and compared that to where you've been historically, on the next slide, you'll see that that actually is an increase from last year. So your tax rate had dropped precipitously from 2016, where you were at $13.45 per thousand, down to, in 2025, where you were at $6.77. And then this year, as we just talked about, it went up from $6.77 to that $7.15. So the drop in tax rate was a function of two things heading into 2025. One was, you had a relatively stable levy, the dollars that you're asking for from the taxpayer, and the value behind each one of those levies was increasing as property values increased in the area. So a little bit of context there. The property values, it's not like you have lots of new growth. You have some new growth in the community, but much of that was a result of inflationary growth, meaning that the homes that are there are worth more. So you would have expected the tax rate to go down, and then that pop up this year, $7.15, certainly was felt by taxpayers. If you were to look at that tax rate, not only on a historical basis, but comparing to some of your peers, other school districts in your geographic area, right in the middle of the piers that are listed here. Statewide, the average was $7.09. You've got, some of the higher tax rates in the state in this peer group. Bayfield, South Shore are on the left there. You also have two of the lowest tax rates in the state in this peer group, being Drummond and Northwood over on the right-hand side. So, you're, by comparative standards in the state, you're pretty average in terms of tax rate. Megan, if you don't mind going to the next slide. So when we put together the plan of finance, one thing we really wanted to keep in mind was that, as we start to message this, clearly that $3.5 million debt service levy is going away. If we were talking about $18.9 million, you may recall from our previous conversation, we felt like we could put that in place without increasing the levy. Or also, we could probably put it in place, I'm certain we can put it in place and have the levy go down. And so I wanted to show you what that looks like. And so, pardon me showing you such a
And the board will get a copy of this, just FYI. I know the numbers are a little bit tough right now, so. Sorry, Kevin, just letting them know.
Go ahead, I'm sorry.
I was just letting them know that the board will get a copy of this, so.
Okay, because they're kind of small. So I'll kind of cut to the chase here. So in 2025-26, your total levy for debt, and this includes a small portion that is your energy efficiency loan, your total levy for debt was $3.9 million. As we mentioned, almost all of that, 3.7 of that goes away as a result of paying off the debt that is retired this year. So heading into next year, if we were to put $14.5 million in place and we assumed a conservative interest rate of 4.5% and spread those payments out over 10 years, that new payment stream would be estimated to be right around $2,050,000. So that is a reduction of about $1,850,000 from where it was last year. So we would expect, if you put this $14.5 million in place and you compare what your annual debt payment this year is compared to what it would be next year, you would have a cost reduction comparatively of about $1,850,000. So, clearly when you compare your levy, the levy that taxpayers just received, to the levy that they had last year, that increase was $1,600,000. So if we're talking about a payment that goes down by about $1,850,000, we can confidently say we're doing what we can to bring your tax rate back into line with where it was a year ago. And I think that might be a really important part of the messaging here. So we could shorten the payments and pay it off over a shorter period of time at a higher value. But I think that this represents kind of a nice balance, putting it in place for 10 years and allowing the tax rate to reduce a little bit. Megan, if you don't mind going to the next page, I think it's a little bit easier to follow if you look at it in terms of a chart. So this chart that I'm showing you here is actually the dollar levies, the actual amount of money that you asked for from taxpayers each year going back to 2016. And you can see that dollar amount had dropped heading into 2023. This is the amount after state aid. And it started to increase in 24, 25, and 26. That was a result of two things. It's a result of primarily loss of aid. And that loss of aid is a result of less money in the state pool. So this year in the biennial budget, there wasn't as much aid put into the pool for all school districts in the state. And as you have become more property wealthy, you've lost aid relative to other school districts in the state. So you can see that high water mark in 2026, where your levy was right at about $12 million. As we just discussed, that pink portion represents just the payment that was the debt piece. Next year, assuming that you are successful in passing the $14.5 million, that debt payment would drop to the blue line, the dark blue line at the top, and would basically reset to a payment that is certainly less than last year. And when it's added to the the actual operational piece of the budget, we're very hopeful and pretty confident that it would be less than what it was in 2025. And so that's kind of the goal of the financing. I'll stop there and take any questions, because I know that's a lot of financial information when you were kind of geared towards getting more fun information from Kevin Bills and Megan. So we'll let you digest that for a minute.
I've got a question.
Absolutely.
So now I'm going to speak all hypotheticals here. So the equalized aid got reduced by 1.6 million because of the state.
1.2,
1.2?
Yeah.
All right, 1.2 million.
roughly. Yep.
If we choose to go forward with referendum and we choose to go forward with the payment structure that's just been discussed, obviously we see the hope is a property tax reduction for our citizens and our taxpayers. But what if next year the state goes, you know what, we're really sorry and we're gonna fix that, and they give us our $1.2 million back? How does that work as far as this goes? Is this something that we then as a district can levy differently to pay off sooner? So the mill rate, as an example, it's currently at 7.15. Again, I'm just going to throw numbers out there. After this, it goes, if referendum goes through, we say we want a 10-year payment, our mill rate goes down to 6.9 as an example. But then the state kicks in a bunch of money and says, hey, here it is. And if we left everything as status quo, that mill rate goes down to $5. Can we still say we want to keep it at that $6.90 and pay this debt down extremely fast?
Yeah, so that's a really great question. The short answer is yes. However, when the bonds are sold, typically investors that purchase the bond would ask for, if it was a 10-year loan, they'd likely have a prepayment beginning in the 7th year. So, you know, you could pay it early. You probably, you could knock up to 7 years off of it and save that 7 years worth of interest costs. Between years 1 and 7, you can put the money into an escrow and have the loan paid off. So in essence, it's paid off. So short answer is yes, that's exactly what we would encourage you to do in that situation if the goal was to maintain a steady levy and a steady impact to taxpayers. So yes, that's absolutely possible and a really thoughtful question. You might ask, well, couldn't we just sell a loan that was prepayable at any time? And you could, but you'd pay a much higher interest rate for that. So bond investors are willing to give you a low interest rate in the current market, but they also want an expectation if they're tying up their money for up to 10 years that they're going to get that rate of return for a period of time as well. So it's always a balancing act in terms of how much call flexibility you want when the loan is sold.
I understand.
Kevin, that was a good segue into the question I wanted to ask you. So your scenario was built on 4.5%.
Yes.
What's your confidence in that, interest rate? And what if it wasn't 4.5%, but rather, something 6.5 or 7%? I'm not sure what that rate could be.
Sure. That's a great question. So, we built this with, that 4.5% has about 100 basis points cushion in it compared to the current market. So, we would think if you sold that today, that interest rate would be in the mid 3% range. So we built in a little bit of cushion in that estimate. However, we've had, it hasn't happened often, but we've had a few circumstances where interest rates are, significantly higher than what was prepared. You can always extend the payment. It doesn't have to be a 10-year loan. It could be a 12-year loan. If the goal was to keep the payment at a certain level, you could extend the life of the loan out a little ways. That really would be a board decision at the time that the borrowing occurs. So that would be a conversation we would have at the time that we were getting ready to market the bonds, which you know, at that point in time, you have a really good idea as to what the interest rates are. But, you know, outside of, you know, very brief time coming out of COVID, we feel like, you know, 100 basis point cushion, especially for a referendum that's occurring this spring, is something that is, you know, a good, solid cushion. We can deliver on that. We feel good about that.
You want to talk about the other scenario? So if you are buying at a lower interest rate, what does that do to the payment?
Yeah, so if interest rates were, that's a great question, thanks, Megan. If interest rates were to come in lower than the estimate, you can either have a lower annual payment, or you can accelerate the debt service a little bit more quickly. Instead of, you know, selling a 10-year loan, you could, for example, sell a, you know, 9.5 or 9-year loan with the payments, you know, targeted where you expected them to be. So you have that flexibility.
Other questions or any?
Follow up real quick on Adam's question on if the state gave us the 1.2 million back. I guess I didn't totally understand, because the 1.2 million we lost was out of equalization aid. So if that came back to us, that would lower the burden on our local taxpayers, but our total amount we could spend per student wouldn't change. So we wouldn't have that 1.2 million to pay down debt, would we?
Yeah, no, and I think I think what would happen is, you know, let's just play that out. So if you're right, it wouldn't change the amount that you have available to spend. Your revenue limit stays the same. But if the state added back funds to the pool of state aid, your state aid could come up, which means that the portion that local taxpayers pay would be less compared to the amount that the state shares in state aid. So your levy would be going down. You could decide as a board in those years where the levy's going down to levy a little bit more for debt service, so that you bring the levy back up to what the target was and pay off the debt more quickly.
Okay.
So take advantage of, if the state increases the aid in the future, then they're back to sharing more of your aid pool. You could levy in Fund 39. You could levy more in Fund 39 debt.
Would we need a referendum? Would we need a referendum to do that? No.
No, for the debt piece, because it's referendum approved already, you can keep
Oh,
that payment stable. So it gives you a lot of flexibility. This is something that Cody and I had talked about last week, and I think that it was a really thoughtful reaction to, you know, what that might be if your goal is to, you know, reduce the interest cost and pay it off more quickly. And it gives you the flexibility to go both directions.
And your slides earlier on the mill rate, that's all equalized value mill rates, correct?
Correct. That's correct.
So yeah, what we try to do with this as best as we can predict the future, but we don't exactly know what state budgets are going to do. This problem around cutting state aid is not unique. You've all read articles I've shared. It's a hot button topic across the state that there are a number of districts that saw large swings in their tax levies because the state aid pools adjusted heavily, for some in the wrong direction. And to be honest with you, it's a small percentage. About 30% saw an increase in state aid. About 70% of us saw a decrease. Now, some of those 70% schools saw a 1 or 2% decrease, a minimal decrease, but essentially because the property values in the school district of Maple have risen quicker when compared across the other districts across the state, we had a large hit. So you are right, Stephen, saying that if the state does come in and put more equalized value money into the pool, there are some things that we can do, but most likely that's going to flow through as tax relief. A good thing, that's not a bad thing, but it doesn't necessarily equate to spendable dollars for us as a district.
Yeah.
So.
And one other thing that I'll say is we're in the middle of the biennial budget. So for 2027, we have a really good idea as to what state aid will likely look like there. We can get a pretty good estimate of what that looks like in that first year of the payment.
And I would, I'm not I don't have a crystal ball, but I would assume that this will be a hot button topic coming through on the next 2-year biennium budget, which seems like it should be a long ways away, but it's not too far around the corner.
You know, not with the governor's election.
No, there's a lot of moving parts there yet. So
I have one more question. I don't know who can answer this, and maybe nobody. So different communities within our district were impacted, different. Right? Not everybody went up the same. How could that influence, I'm thinking of different communities like, pick an Iron River, like the Bagman, whatever. How could that influence a referendum vote based on what they were already seeing as being a tax increase? My question clear?
Mhm. That's a really good question. So last year, your school, the value of the school district went up by 9.7%. So if you look at all the communities in the school district, on average, the increase in value was 9.7%. But some communities had more growth than that. So you mentioned the town of Hughes, the town of Iron River, town of Lulu, although they're really small, Rural and Poplar all went up more than 9.7%. So all things being equal, they shared a little bit more in that levy than they did the year before. But then every other school district, or every other community, Cloven, Hawthorne, Highland, Maple, and Nevada again, all were less than the average. And so there was less levy shared there. Now that's, on average, of the community, probably had communities on the lake, for example, on a lake that might, or homes that might have gone up more than the average in the community. And so, they might have shared more than their neighbor year over year. So I would say if that's a vacation property, the owner of that home is probably shouldn't, if it's not their permanent residence, they're not voting in the election for the referendum.
So speaking of that point, the equalized value is what really appropriates the levy across the different townships. So
That's correct.
in theory, if our levy was $10 million 2024 and our levy was $10 million 2025, tax bills in a town could go up disproportionately because the equalized value moves disproportionately between towns. And how that equalized value is really, Kevin, correct me if I'm wrong, it's determined based off of the Department of Revenue. I want to make sure I'm clear on that the school district has no skin in this game or no say in this game. The Department of Revenue analyzes sales, and if a house sells for $1 million in community A and a house sells for $100,000 in community B, that impacts that equalized value. So even though the levy is the same, this is crazy for people to think about. Your tax levy your tax dollar amount might go up strictly because of the property value sales surrounding you in the community. And that's,
You share in a larger proportion of it.
yeah. And that, again, I hit back to is really hard because the levy for us can be exactly the same, but the tax bill the taxpayer pays might be different because of factors that are completely out of our control. And I think we all know the communities that exist around us that have, wealthy, rich, or, property rich, housing as a general rule. They're on our lakes. And when that house sold 10 years ago for $500,000 is now selling for $1 million, that's how that adjusts that equalized value. And why you see what you go back to, some communities had a large increase and some communities had, 1%, 2%, 3% increase. And that's hard to explain to people, but all things being equal, Kevin is correct that everybody should have saw at least some kind of equal percentage, but that's not the case. And I do have.
That's a great explanation, Cody. Just as an editorial, you make a really fine business manager.
We'll consider that.
The checks in the mail on that one, Kevin. Thank you very much. I appreciate that. Are there any other financial questions as we try to get to where we need to get to in this meeting? Last question. Last time for any other ones that we want to hit. So.
Thank you for the information.
Thank you.
So the next steps is to, and I don't know, Megan or Kevin, anything you want to add? I know we've got another slide here that I'm looking at just to proposed referendum question, which I think we can take over from here. You guys are more than welcome to stay online if you wish, but is there anything you want to add from your end?
I was muted, sorry. As Kevin Mullen calls us the fun stuff, I would just wrap up with a few more key points. So I quickly ran through the draft resolution language. Cody will explain to you what that is, but if the board were to adopt tonight, I just want to lay out a few steps that will take place. So Cody will work with your legal counsel. I know he's working very closely with Allison Buchanan from Coral. She does most of them throughout the state. But she will, they'll work on submitting the required DPI forms. Now, if voted on, that locks in the verbiage that you vote on and the dollar amount. The financing component will be discussed after a successful referendum. So Kevin talked about different interest rates and different amortization schedules. That, as long as the community is to approve the dollar amount, the funding will take care of, and the bond sales will be taken care of after the referendum. But what we would do that on the back end is we would work as a team to take all of the stuff that we talked about, a lot of technical things today. We talked about details of HVAC systems and financing components and equalized value. That's a lot of stuff that you as board members are educated in, but when it gets to the community, that's something that is new information to community members for the most part. So what we do on our communications team is take all of the information surrounding the referendum. So the why is the district going to referendum, what is included, when can you vote, and how will this impact taxes? We'll take all of that and package it into what I call layman's terms. So it's easy, it's small, it's consistent and digestible information. And then we will work on creating a referendum brand and a referendum messaging strategy. So I just threw up here's some examples of work that we've done in the past, but we'll work with Cody and the rest of the team to just build out what are some mediums that you use today as a district that you find successful, and what are some things that we find successful with other referendums, and build out a strategically timed communications plan to make sure that every resident understands what is on the ballot, why it's on the ballot, and how is it going to impact their taxes. So that's all stuff that we will do behind the scenes, and then we'll come back to the board on your February board meeting and talk through all of those components. So we'll have the strategy laid out. How are we using direct mail? How are we using social media? How are we using face-to-face meetings? That'll be all laid out and presented to you. And then also, how have we digested this and how have we created digestible information to share with the public? So there's a lot of information, and we spent 10 months going through this process. We don't expect you to know all of that. But what we will do is create some key messages for you to remember and share. So I always call it our referendum elevator pitch. And so leading the board meeting next February or next month, my hope is that every board member will have their own referendum elevator speech. So when someone sees you at a Lions Club or out to eat on Saturday night or at the grocery store, you can say, hey, have you seen the referendum? Have you heard about it? Here's a couple key facts. And they have to be facts. So we'll talk more about this in February again. But if you are to adopt tonight until you see us again in February, remember that the information the district creates or our communication team creates on behalf of the district and what we share has to be 100% factual. We cannot advocate one way or another. And as a board member in your capacity, as a board member in your board meetings, you must advocate as well. Or sorry, you have to be factual, so you cannot advocate one way or another. So as a board member, in the role of a board member, must be factual. All information the district shares will be factual. You are a taxpayer, so outside of your role as a board member, you can choose to communicate how you wish. So that's all the stuff that we'll be doing behind the scenes if you adopt, and you'll see us again in February with the messaging to vote April 7th. Anything to add, Kevin or Kevin?
No, that was great.
I will say, I'm very impressed with the board. You had a lot of insightful questions. So I was jotting a lot of those down. One thing that we'll do on our end is create what we call an FAQ. So it's not your mainstream messaging, but there'll be questions that come up in the community. And so I started jotting some of these down, and we'll create answers for those. And we'll update those on a pretty regular basis. So every board meeting from February to April, you'll receive an updated FAQ just to glance over. And if someone in the community asks you a question that's not for the key messaging, you don't remember what that answer is, you can go back to that and make the answer there. But it'll also be posted on the website. So lots of different levels of information, how we're sharing it, but I don't want it to be overwhelming to you as a board member. It's our job to make it easy, digestible, clear, clean, and concise. With that, thank you for your time.
Can I ask a question? I don't want to drag this out. However, can you enlighten me a little bit more on the district must only share factual information it cannot advocate for or against? I can't sell this?
You want to take that one, Megan?
I mean, if I give facts, but give the reasons for the facts and why they should do this, I can't do that?
So that's where the fine, that's where the fine line, that's where the fine line is. So you can't say vote yes as a board member in your board rule tonight.
Okay.
If you are out for fish on a Friday night and you say, as a taxpayer, I'm voting yes because of X, Y, and Z, that is okay. But you cannot use a district computer, a district email to share any advocacy information.
Okay. That makes sense.
So you can say to them, as I am talking to you as Adam Landwehr community member, not Adam Landwehr board.
All right. Yeah, no, I understand that. Okay.
But it is also fair to say that, the district was thoughtful in terms of what we're looking at. And these are the reasons we feel that these projects are necessary for the school district and why we feel, it's important to do them now as opposed to, clearly you have reasons, thoughtful,
Insight.
arguments for coming to this point. It's absolutely fair to explain why the board felt it's a reasonable decision to be going with this package of projects and this cost, and to explain that. And that's what the actual communication piece will also do, but it's not going to take the next step and say you must vote yes or please support us, or that's not the role of the board.
Right. No, I understand that. I just want to make sure I can do more than just be a monotone voice,
I have one more quick question, and sometimes I think of what could go wrong. Tell me again what happens if it doesn't pass April 7th.
I can take that one. So if it doesn't pass April 7th, we continue to move forward. The next.
Yeah, what kind of problem these guys gonna have?
Coming from the guy
You're
who's
still
up.
saying you're full.
Oh, we're having fun. So if we hear no in April, the board will have the opportunity to determine that the next possible question can happen November 2026.
You can
Wow.
you can sharpen your pencil, whatever, and come back in November.
We'd have to try to do some, what did we learn, or what can we tweak and adjust, or where are we at? Because one thing I will tell you is that the needs that we have aren't going, the roof's not magically going to fix itself. I've tried. So that'll be the work from, April into, spring into summer as to what the next steps might be from a school district standpoint. So don't have a clear step on that one, but we would have to reevaluate.
I always say the sun will come up the next day, your needs will still exist, and you can take a few weeks, months to digest that, gather community information. And then in 2026, there is the opportunity to go in November. Legally, a school district can ask 2 referendum questions per calendar year. So with one available in April, you do have one available in November. But your survey feedback's positive, you have great support outside of even the referendum question that was asked, the climate and the culture questions. Overall, the community supports what you're doing, and you've listened to their comments. So you got support at 18.9 million, but you also heard taxpayers are paying a lot for the same amenity. So what you've done is scaled back.
Thank you, everybody in the Microsoft Teams world. We appreciate it.
Yeah, thank you.
Thanks, Melanie is connected virtually.
Thank you.
Thank you. We can probably, if you want to close that, Jen, feel free. Thank you both, everybody.
Thank you.
Have a good night.
Bye-bye.
Me? All right. Or, yeah.
So yeah, we're to the point where we've got to determine as a board if we're going to put a question on the ballot. That's where we're at. And I guess to quickly summarize, just so we know the whole process, we started this back almost a year ago. And we've identified potentially over 380 projects totaling almost $42 million that'll be in need within the next, either on our doorstep currently or anywhere from 6 to 10 years down the road based on the useful life of all the back channel things that make this thing go. We surveyed our community, and I think this is important to note that we're trying to listen to our community in light of the cut in state aid and trying to find a middle ground. So we've reduced that ask. We've pared down what we're looking to do. We're still prioritizing maintenance areas that'll help our buildings service our students for years to come. And we're trying to do that in the most fiscally responsible way that we can. So that is a message that I want to make sure gets out here in the YouTube world, but also as we move forward with this. So we're to the point now where the recommendation would be to put a question in front of our taxpayers to see where they are at and ultimately give them the ability to answer, yes, we support you, or no, we don't. So
item 10 is the initial question. Do we pursue this, right?
Yeah,
And
so
item 11 is the language.
I think they're.
So they're kind of 1 and 1A. Yeah, there's some legal stuff that we have to have. Adam's going to have to read off the script here because there's some requirements from our friends at Corals and Brady, which is the legal firm that's writing this question. I know you got a joke out of that one, but that is their name.
Yeah.
And Allison Buchanan is who I've worked with behind the scenes, who's awesome and excellent. She's worked with us for years. She's done our short-term borrowing too, which requires them to be involved as well. But I'm going to turn it over to you, Adam, to read off the script, and then the board has to make some decisions on, was it number 10 and then number 11.
Yeah. So and just to reiterate what Cody had said, the first number that came in was just over 40. We had asked in the survey for just short of 19 million. All everybody's tax bill came out. We heard what people had to say. I'm not sure how many phone calls or conversations all of you have had. I've had my share. And we went back again. Cody did a great job of identifying additional cuts that we thought we could do, still be able to ask and have not have a negative tax impact on our people. Came to this dollar amount of not to exceed 14.5 million. So I am going to read this, and then we are going to need a motion and a second based off of what I read, and then it's a roll call vote. So I think we've beat this to death as to kind of what we've had with all of these meetings. So here we are. So I'm going to read item 10 again. An initial resolution authorizing general obligation bonds in an amount not to exceed 14.5 million. And then be it resolved by the school board of the school district of Maple, Douglas, and Bayfield counties, Wisconsin, that there shall be issued pursuant to Chapter 67 of the Wisconsin statutes, general obligation bonds in an amount not to exceed $14,500,000 for the public purpose of paying the cost of a school facility improvement project consisting of district-wide capital maintenance, building infrastructure, systems and site improvements, and acquisition of furnishings, fixtures, and equipment. With that being said, I would entertain a motion and a second. Not all of us.
I will make a motion to go to referendum for amount of $14.5 million,
Not to exceed.
not to exceed $14.5 million.
I'll second it.
Dan and Kent, we have a motion and a second. This is going to require a roll call vote. Mr. Probst, you want to start?
Yes.
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 Ms. Brunette? Mr. Cowley?
Yes.
Mr. Glonick?
Yes.
Mr. Hirsch?
Yes.
Ms. Johnson?
Yes.
And I will vote yes. So it is a unanimous 7-0. Item 11, resolution providing for a referendum election on the question of the approval of an initial resolution authorizing the issuance of general obligation bonds in an amount not to exceed $14.5 million.
So this is the document that has a lot of different of the legal beagle stuff. We have to approve this, basically saying that we've determined that this is the question we're going to ask, and this is the question that's actually going to go through. So this is it seems redundant and repetitive, but not a process that I set up. I listen to the folks that tell us how to do this legally correct.
So is this the language that would be on the ballot?
The language that'll be on the ballot is the language that Adam just read. Does that make sense? With regards to it identifies the broad strokes, because we cannot put 72 pages on a ballot, right?
Yeah.
There's
Okay.
there's
So
some,
it's not what's in item 11, it's what he read
correct.
first.
This one is also going to require a motion, a second, and a roll call. So I would entertain a motion.
I'll make that motion to, well, I'm just gonna,
As
To
read.
adopt the
to adopt it as stated.
I'll second it.
We have a motion and a second. Is there any more discussion before we vote? All right, we'll start on the other side of the room. Ms. Johnson,
Yes.
Mr. Hirsch,
Yes.
Mr. Glonick,
Yes.
Mr. Coleman. Mr. Cowley.
Yes.
It's a long night. Mrs. Brunette,
Yes.
Mr. Probst,
Yes.
and I vote yes, 7-0. That one passes. We got a lot of work to do here going forward, I reckon. So,
Yes.
all right. With that being said, I would entertain a motion and a second for adjournment.
I make a motion to adjourn.
I'll second. Oh, quick.
Who's gonna take it? Anita?